Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Greg Fearby with Kent State's Center for Corporate and Professional Development. We appreciate you joining us for our webinar today on managing positive discipline with Kent State facilitator Scott Tackett. When you entered the webinar, your audio was muted, so we would ask that if you have questions on the control panel on the right side of your screen, you can submit questions via chat, and we will be happy to address those as time permits. We do have over 200 registered participants today, which is the reason for muting everyone so that we can make it easy for everyone to follow along. We will also be offering a couple of polls throughout the webinar today, so we encourage you to participate in those. And one thing I'd like to throw out before we pass it over to Scott is that we will email you a recording of the webinar upon conclusion of the webinar. That's a common question we get, so thought we'd address that right up front. So again, thank you for joining us for Managing Positive Discipline. We hope that you find it very entertaining as well as informative, and will learn something and perhaps explore Kent State Center for Corporate and Professional Development further to address your training and development needs. So without further ado, Mr. Scott Tackett.
Greg, thank you. Appreciate it. Let me welcome all of you again, ladies and gentlemen, for attending today, and echo Greg's statements. We hope that you will find this very, very informative, and really enable you to take out of today's hour-long session some things that you can apply immediately into your workplace as we talk about managing employee discipline. We're going to start out with a poll right off the bat, and the poll question is, how many employees do you supervise? Greg?
All right, everyone. The poll should be up on your screen. If you could take a second here to answer the question, it'll help Scott understand the audience so that we can more appropriately address your needs. So we'll give it a few seconds here and let everybody in. All right. Looks like the overwhelming majority, 61%, is in that first category of 0 to 5 employees, and second place finisher over 20. So you've got both ends of the spectrum to work with, Scott. So back to you.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much. We appreciate that information, and it will help me as we go forward. What I want to talk about is, first of all, before we get too far into the material, let's talk about the agenda. What are the things that we want to accomplish today in this short period of time that we have together? What I'd like to do is convince you of the importance of positive discipline, and I use that word positive specifically. Discipline has traditionally been viewed in many organizations by employees as punitive. I want to change that mindset, and I want us to look at it not from a punitive perspective, but from a positive perspective. And I'll go through in today's session how we can make that happen. So it really is about changing your culture and changing your mindset. We'll talk about the importance of discipline systems, okay? This is critical throughout every organization. You're going to hear me use a phrase throughout today and talk about the idea of being firm, fair, and consistent. That's really the foundation of a discipline system, and everyone inside the organization needs to be on the same page. As we develop that system, we're going to find that we are able to manage discipline, not allow the other end of the spectrum to be discipline managing us. So the agenda really is going to focus on several key goals throughout this development of your managing discipline. And I want to reinforce before we get too farther into the program is that this is not about how to terminate employees. That's the furthest thing from my goal. My goal is to really learn to solve the problem and maintain the relationship. Today's very, very competitive labor market, we know how hard it is to find the right people, and it's equally hard to retain. So I really don't want to create a scenario where we figure out how to terminate people. I want to create a scenario on how we solve the problem and maintain the relationship. So in that regard, there's several session goals that I have in doing the managing discipline from a positive perspective. First of all, I'd like to reinforce the concept that managing discipline can and should be a very, very specific intervention in removing barriers to performance. Another way that I could put this is that we don't ever want to make discipline and anyone feel like we are going after them personally. We are going after the behavior, and we are going after that behavior that is inappropriate in the workplace, that is causing us not to be successful in obtaining the performance standards that we expect. Number two, I would hope to help you all realize that if we manage it properly, discipline will serve as a means of encouraging and obtaining the desired long-term goals of the organization. So what does that really mean? What it means is that as we look at holding people accountable, and we use that term accountability throughout the many times throughout the day, and I think what I'd like to communicate to you all is to understand that as we work towards the organizational goals, we're going to obtain those organizational goals with and through our employees or the folks that report to us and everyone inside the organization. So we want to have a structure that says and communicates to everyone what are those expectations. So I strongly recommend to all of you that regardless of what you've done in the past, and if you haven't maybe done a good job at the beginning, let's look forward. Let's go forward. Let's not worry about the past. So let's start with a new formula, and that new formula becomes, let's set expectations, hold people accountable, give them the tools and resources they need to do their job, whatever that might be, training, tools, equipment, whatever will enable them to be successful. Once you've done that, then you can start to process through managing discipline to recognize and reward good performance, and also on the other side, hold people accountable to the inappropriate behaviors. There's got to be ramifications for good as well as unacceptable performance, and that's another message that I want to make sure that in the time that we have together that I continue to reinforce. And so what we do in that process of day-to-day managing performance, both from a positive perspective as well as a negative perspective, we will be striving to obtain the long-term goals of the organization. And so remember, setting expectations is recognizing and understanding what are those goals, and then communicating those goals, giving people what they need to accomplish that, and then ultimately sharing in the successes of accomplishing that. Now, you'll see on the slide that I've got a term control here. Let me explain what that means. I want you to be comfortable in understanding that discipline is a tool, and it's only one of the tools that we use to obtaining the goals of the organization. But as I'm sure that many of you already recognize, there's a couple skills that we need as leaders and managers inside of your company. And those skills revolve around being able to manage and be able to lead. And you've got to do and be good at both. So on the managerial side, if you'll think about your schooling and recognize the definition of management has not really changed over many years. So as I manage, I've got to be able to manage the systems, the processes, the procedures. I've got to be able to staff, to lead, to control, to direct. And so that's not a negative term, control. We have to have a system in place that makes people aware of what are the expectations, what are the things that we can do to help them meet those expectations so that we can be successful. The other side of it is the leadership side. So I want you to really understand that we've got to manage and we've also got to lead, and we have to be good at both. And those are skills that are critical to the success that you will have. Remember, your true measure of success as a manager and a leader inside of your companies is how successful are your people. And you are guiding that success. And so in order to do that, we want to utilize both our skills as a manager and our skills as leaders. But as I say here, that's only one of the tools that we have available to us. And so in recognizing this, realize that just being a good manager is not going to be successful. Just being a good leader, not going to be successful. We want to be great at both of those. So how do we do that? If we learn to juggle those two and balance those two responsibilities, you will recognize and understand that as we start handling discipline, we will develop and then sustain that positive employee relations program. And that's the ultimate goal. If you think about your employees, I would submit to all of you that probably in each one of your organizations, you have three categories of employees. You have stars, you have fence sitters, and you have actively disengaged employees. So let's look at each three of those categories. The stars, they come in every day. They do a great job. You can depend on them. You know that they're going to come in and pretty much get the job done every single day. Your fence sitters. Usually your fence sitters are your largest percentage of your employees. And these are the folks that you're not really sure what you're going to get. Some days they do really well. Other days they not so well. Now we talk about the actively disengaged. And this is the group of employees that really they work harder at getting out of work than if they would just do their job. So what we want to do is recognize that in managing discipline and sustaining the organization is really dealing with all three of these categories. What do I mean by that? If you have stars who come in every single day and they do their job, and you're not dealing with those actively disengaged employees, two things are going to happen to your stars, and both of those are bad. Number one, the stars' performance is going to start to lower to the expectations that you set. A good analogy that I heard a long time ago from a very, very astute leader, he told me that people's performance will raise or lower to your expectations. Set the bar high, give them the tools and resources they need to do their job, and generally they won't disappoint you. The other side of that coin is set the bar low, and they probably won't disappoint you either. So we want to set the bar high for everyone. So when we have the star level, we want to make sure that we are firm, fair, and consistent in dealing with everyone. So if you don't address those actively disengaged, as I said, the ramifications are going to be pretty negative. Number one, your stars will lower their expectation because you have set that expectation for your folks. Or two, the stars will leave you. And they'll go find another job. They'll go find another job. And we all know that that's a recipe for disaster. So as I look at this, my suggestion here is to begin to ensure that if you want to create a positive employee relations program, you do it by handling discipline, by being and holding each one of the categories to the expectations of the organization. And so once you do that, you start to see that the fence sitters slowly but surely will move more towards the star category. Remember the actively disengaged, that's misery loves company. So they're trying to pull those fence sitters to their side. But if we are managing discipline, if we're good at the managerial side of control, if we're good at the leadership side of control, the actively disengaged are going to recognize that the gig's up, so to speak, okay? And sooner or later, one or two things are going to happen there. They're either going to leave or the system is going to deal with the actively disengaged. So my encouragement is that there's a long-term result here to managing discipline properly, and we will create a very, very positive employee relations program. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't indicate that you have a very, very significant responsibility here. One of the things that I do want to communicate during the time that we're together is to know the importance of ensuring that everyone knows and understands the practices, the policies, and the procedures of the organization. And so that needs to start at day one. I believe it's important in the hiring process to sit and make sure that we're communicating, regardless of the position, regardless of the person that we're hiring, to make sure that everyone understands from day one, these are our expectations, and ensuring that we will enforce these practices and policies throughout their employment process. So what does this place upon you? Your responsibilities are, one, to know the practices and policies of the organization completely and thoroughly. It is also important to make sure that you step up and recognize that you have to enforce those practices and policies through effective and ongoing communications, meaning that one of the roles that you probably recognize maybe or have or dealing with, or if not, you're going to recognize that you've got to become the CRO. What's the CRO? CRO is the Chief Reinforcement Officer. So even though you may have said this to an employee when they first started, or 6 months ago, or a year ago, or 2 years ago, it doesn't matter. You have to continue to reinforce what our policies and practices are. We're dealing with human beings, and traditionally human beings fall into that organizational apathy. And the organizational apathy isn't that they don't care. The organizational apathy is that we tend to go back to our comfort zones. And so our role and responsibility is to make sure that we don't allow folks to go back to their comfort zones, and we set those standards. You know, one of the best ways that you're going to set those standards is to not only become the Chief Reinforcement Officer, but lead by example. I probably don't have to tell anyone on this webinar that as a manager, as a leader, as a supervisor, whatever your role and responsibilities you have, is that you're under the microscope. People know when you come in. They know when you go home. They are very, very aware of your ongoing activities during the day. So we have to lead by example. And I don't suggest that you have to be the first one in and the last one out. What I do suggest is that you have to recognize that you can't just talk a good game. It's your actions, it's your behaviors, day in and day out, that are going to truly be reflective of enforcing policies and practices by leading by example. You can't have two sets of standards, and you can't be in a position where you talk out of one side of your mouth and don't follow the policies and practices yourself. The second point is really important to me. And I talk about the idea of understanding the need to encourage and facilitate a very, very positive working relationship between your HR department and yourselves. And here's what I mean by that. None of us have the capabilities of being employment law specialists. Today, I can talk to you at 20 minutes after 2 about Family and Medical Leave Act. I can talk to you about Americans with Disabilities Act. I can talk to you all about the federal, local, state, municipal rules and policies and practices that we have to enforce. But that's ever changing. Something can change in 15 minutes. It can change in an hour. It can change tomorrow. Your human resource department should be a service to you. And that's really important, that you facilitate that relationship and understand where the human resource department is coming from. You know, the important consideration in today's world, no matter what, is documentation, documentation, documentation. We want to support you in the HR department. We want to be able to help you every step of the way, but we have to have documentation. Also, as these laws change, as employment law situations and interpretations are affected by recent court decisions or Supreme Court rules or governmental agency rules, they're so flexible that we want to make sure that we're working within the framework. So please understand how important it is to work with us in the HR department, work with your fellow supervisors, managers, so that we have a consistent approach and we have a better understanding of the policies, practices, and procedures as they apply to our organization. What I'd like to do is just quickly ask you to evaluate your level of knowledge with regard to your overall company policies as they relate to your employees and your direct reports. Now, this is just a self-evaluation, okay? If we're going to be successful in management and leadership, one of the things that I always talk about with all of my participants in all of my programs is the idea of self-reflection, and make that self-reflection accurate, okay? Do you really, truly understand and are familiar with the overall policies of the company? Could you use some more training? Do you feel totally inadequate and need help? And a lot of times we move into roles and responsibilities at a higher level, and maybe for whatever reasons we haven't spent the time, we haven't spent given the opportunity to become better at what we can be. Now, this is not to say, and we use the term experts, not to say that we're ever considered experts, but I really want you to take a look at and evaluate what you need to do. This is an opportunity for growth. This is an opportunity for you to say to someone, hey, you know what? I think I really need a better understanding of our attendance policy. I think I need a better understanding of our employee manual. I think I need a better understanding of OSHA guidelines. And so those are the kinds of conversations that I like to stimulate with these types of programs. And to be able to say, geez, I really didn't realize that. I really didn't understand what it meant when we talk about a question that comes up with Family Medical Leave Act, or a question of discipline. And, what is documentation? What is good documentation? That question comes up to me a lot. How thorough should I be? How quickly should I engage in discipline? So how long does that discipline process last? So these are things that you want to be governed by your company policies. You want to utilize your leadership and your management team to be able to be on the same track. So really look at yourself and identify. This is not something that is to point out a weakness. This is something to look at and say, hey, I need some help. So I'd really like you to take a look at that and then be in a position of deciding what might be a growth opportunity, and then explore that opportunity. We all will continue to grow. The minute you stop growing from a management leadership perspective is the minute that you're not going to be successful as you possibly can be in your organization. And last but not least, and I've already indicated this in a couple conversations so far, really today is about managing positive discipline, is about solving the problem and maintaining the relationship. I really believe in the statement that anyone can terminate anyone else. That's not what we're talking about here. The real skill level is being able to determine why a person is not performing, how to solve that problem, and maintain the relationship. A question that I always ask in my training session is, do you know how much it costs to hire an employee? And I'm just talking about the basic entry-level employee. And I usually get the response, well, I'm not sure. No, haven't really thought about that, or it costs a lot. That third response is it costs a lot is really accurate. What you need to figure out, though, is to really get that clear understanding of what it costs to hire an employee. So the point of that is that if we recognize the initial cost in hiring an employee from the minute we place the ad all the way through the interview screening process, all of the background checks, all of the pre-employment issues that go through, then the training until that employee hits the ground running, trust me, it costs a lot. All right. So whenever we're not successful for whatever reasons, then that's a cost that the company has lost. Having said that, there comes a point where we do not want to continue to add to that cost, and ultimately we have to let that employee go. But through a process of managing positive discipline, I think you'll find that at the end of the day, really, and I can say this after 25 years in management and leadership, that if I had done my job, I really never terminated anyone. And the reason I can say that is that they have terminated themselves. And that's where I want to get you. And that's where I want to get you comfortable, because it's not easy, ladies and gentlemen. It is not easy telling someone that they're not performing. And so what I want to do is help make that more palatable through the appropriate system of managing positive discipline. So the whole program is really revolving around learning how to approach poor performance from a different perspective, and keeping in mind that view and perspective that what I want to do is solve the problem and maintain the relationship. So in order to do that, what I've got to learn is to really understand that managing poor performance, there's a reason that people don't perform. And we're going to talk about those 4 reasons here in a minute. So if I can look at that, I can learn to ignore the excuse and attack the problem. And we'll talk about what those problems are. In doing that, that work and effort that you put is creating an organizational culture of what I refer to as positive self-discipline, so that people recognize that we are doing it appropriately, and that it is not about going after someone. It is really about creating an environment where everyone is self-accountable. Now, that sounds like pie in the sky. Trust me, it is not. Given the fact that as everyone works together, as everyone creates that culture, so we can't have one department or one area or one manager or one leader or one supervisor engaging in the concepts that I'm talking about. Everyone has to be part of this culture. You can create a culture of positive self-discipline where people know at the end of the day, they are going to be held accountable, and they are making decisions upon whether they want to remain employed or not. It's really a program that we refer to, and I'm hoping that all of you or many of you have a progressive discipline procedure in place where we give people the opportunity to change the behavior over a period of time. We'll talk more about that as we go through the program. I think that to reinforce what we said, and there's a significant number of lot smarter people than I am that say it a lot better than I do. In a management professor of management book that I read, Orrin said that good employees' discipline mostly depends on the supervisor's daily behavior and decisions being aligned in the same positive direction and with the consistency of actions. So really, the point of what he goes on to say is discipline is the daily grind that makes things happen and lets people know that you're worthy of your word. In short, it's about honor and integrity. So your ability to build credibility with your employees is really seen as a critical component to success. The takeaway here is that in your desires to ensure that we are holding everyone to a standard, you're leading by example. You are putting yourself in a position of going after the behavior and not making it personal. You know, we don't want our employees to believe that we are exhibiting favoritism. And in order to be firm, fair, and consistent, you have to be objective. And so the goal here is not for you to ever look at this as I can be friends, pals, and buddies with your employees. That will not work, has not worked, and no matter how much we'd like to say, oh, I can separate the two, it's impossible in my estimation. It is not impossible to make sure that you look and hold everyone to the same standards, including yourself, and that you will do that regardless of the of how difficult that may be. But if I go after the behavior, I will maintain my honor and my integrity with every one of my employees. So what happens is I build respect and credibility. I think we have a question.
Yeah, Scott, we have a question come in regards to something you started this slide with, which was making sure you don't allow it to become personal. Can you give some ideas on how the manager ensures that they're not allowing the discipline to become personal?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. What I've learned over my my 35 years in business is that when I'm sitting down with an employee, I want to have data, facts, and information. So when I'm talking to an individual about performance, I'm going to give a very, very specific examples as to what that performance shortcoming is. So I'm not attacking the individual, I'm going after the behavior. So I might say, for example, if we've got someone that has an attitude problem, and that's one of the most difficult areas that I find that managers and leaders deal with. You could approach it one of two ways, and trust me, I've made the mistakes. You can sit down with someone and say, Greg, you've got a very bad attitude. And Greg is going to take that personally right off the bat. So what's going to happen is that you're going to get that pushback from Greg. Now Greg is thinking you're attacking him, and Greg is going to come back and attack you. And I assure you that meeting is going to go downhill from there. The better way to approach it is, Greg, I'd like to talk to you about some things that I've observed over the last week, 2 weeks, last month. Give Greg specific examples of that inappropriate behavior. I am not attacking him personally. I'm giving him examples. Then I remove the emotion from the conversation. So in any meeting that you're talking about poor performance, have your data, facts, and specific examples that you want to talk about. I hope that answered the question. And thank you, that's appropriate. So, despite our best efforts, folks, and you know, this is a very, very difficult area. We want to be viewed, and we want to have an organization of engagement. We want to believe that people come into work every single day with the best intentions. But I've got to be honest with you, and I think you all would agree with me, especially if you recognize those actively disengaged employees. We're going to have to confront inappropriate behavior. And that's going to take courage. And as I said earlier, it's not easy to sit down in front of someone and tell them that they're not performing. But if you adhere to some of the things I've said today about the idea of going after specific examples, not making it personal, not buying into, well, you just don't like me, or you've never liked me. No, let's talk about specific behavior. So we're going to have to confront that inappropriate behavior. And I think you heard me mention earlier in the discussion that I would suggest to you that you ignore the excuse, because my experience has been, as long as we accept excuses, employees are going to continue to give us excuses. And really the way to do this is to go after the problem. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in the next few minutes. From my experience, what are the 4 reasons that people don't perform? And one of the things that I'm sure many of you have experienced, as I did early on in my career, is that when an employee wasn't performing, I would call them in. We'd have this nice meeting and discussion, and they'd go, "Oh yeah, sorry, I've had all this stuff happen, but I'm good now, and I'm going to get better." So they get better for a while. Slowly but surely, the performance decreases back to unacceptable levels. So you know what? I have this meeting again, and I say, "Oh, come on, Greg, you got to do better." And Greg said, "Yep, I will do better. Just had some other issues come up, and I'm ready to go back." And so we have this wave of performance up and down. We know the employee can do the job, but they continue to, for a lack of a better phrase, not perform. They play the game. And we allow them by accepting those excuses. I'm going to suggest that you stop accepting those excuses. And at some point in time, what I have found is that the way to ignore the excuses is to really go after the problem and also make the employee aware of the seriousness of the continued behavior. My experience is that people will not change their inappropriate behavior until, ladies and gentlemen, there are ramifications for those behaviors. As long as I accept it, as long as I continue to shake my head, okay, they're going to continue to do it. Now, that is not a threat, so do not anticipate that I'm telling you it's okay to threaten people. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I need to make that employee aware of the continued behavior. If that behavior continues, they could be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination, so that they're aware. Now they choose to make those decisions. That's why I said earlier, at the end of the day, if I'm doing my job, then they choose to terminate themselves, not me. So let's talk about why do employees fail. And I like to have a lot of discussion at this point during the program, but I'll give you the real quick overview of what I believe is the reasons for people's failure. It could be a knowledge problem, an aptitude problem, attitude problem, or outside influences. So quickly, we'll go through these. Knowledge problem. I'm here to tell you that my experience has been many times we succumb to the warm body syndrome. We hire an employee, we bring them in, and they've got a pulse in their breathing, and more times than not, through on-the-job training, and have not done a good job of on-the-job training, we put them in the position because we need that body, we need that person, we need that production, we need that job. So we've not set them up for success. So ultimately, we kind of question 6 weeks from now, 8 weeks from now, 10 weeks from now, oh boy, why is Greg failing? Well, it could be a knowledge problem. And we've not done a good job. So I'm always looking in the mirror to reflection. I'm not accepting excuses. If the employee says, hey, I wasn't broke in properly. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I've never seen the job description. No one sit down and talk to me about expectations. I'm going to remove those excuses. If I need to do additional training, I'm going to do additional training. If I need to go over the job description again, guess what? I'm going to go over the job description again. If I need to ensure that there is a complete understanding of all, if I've got to go over standard operating procedures again, whatever I need to do. And so what I have done is, and let's say that we go the route of additional training, and we're going to use on-the-job training, and I get my best trainer, and that trainer assures me that Greg is ready to go. 2 weeks from now, a month from now, if I'm having the same problems with Greg, that Greg can't use, that he didn't know, wasn't aware of, no one ever told him, because I've removed that excuse. Aptitude. Folks, I would submit to all of you right now that there are employees in your current workforce that do not have the aptitude for the position, either mental or physical aptitude. Usually these are very good employees. They come to work, they do their job to the best of their ability, but they're not meeting the expectations because they have a physical or mental aptitude for the job. You've got to deal with those. And that is a very, very difficult situation. When you have that, you're really faced with two choices. One, do we have another area, another job, another position within their KSAs, their knowledge, their skills, and abilities? If we do, you have a responsibility to move them to that position. I did not say that you have to create, nor should you create, a position for them. And that's something we have to be very, very, very careful of not doing. Because at the end of the day, your businesses, the majority of your businesses, I'm sure, are for profit. You're there to make money, and you don't have the luxury of creating positions. If that's the case, and you cannot create a position for that individual, then that's a very, very difficult decision, but you are going to have to let that person go. Okay. Now, mind you, you've done all the training, you've done all the things that you possibly can do. If they don't have the aptitude for the job, you have to let them go. Third one, attitude. I gave you an example of how to deal with an attitude problem. Bad attitudes are negative, and they are very, very serious ramifications for performance and have a negative attitude, negative connotations for the business. A bad attitude will destroy companies, it will destroy teams, it will destroy businesses. Do not accept a bad attitude. As I suggested, you do not go to that individual and tell them they've got a bad attitude. What you do is you tell them and give them specific examples. Outside influences, I'm sure that you're all aware, your employees cannot generally come to work and forget all their problems and leave them at the door. Outside influences are marital problems, financial problems, drug and alcohol problems. That's a very, very difficult one. But from an outside influence perspective, please recognize and understand that you are not a counselor. Do not cross that line and become a counselor. You counsel performance. So hopefully many of your organizations have the ability to have employee assistance programs. Those of you who do not have an employee assistance program, I strongly recommend that you urge the employee to get help outside of the business, but recognize that, for example, if attendance is the issue, they have to come to work. I'd love this to be in a nice little package, but you might encounter the idea that employees fail for multitudes of reasons. I've had in my experience employees with knowledge problems, attitude problems, actually all four of them. So while we'd like to believe it's very easy, this is very difficult. But remember what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to eliminate the excuses, attack the problem, and move forward. So as you do this, I would like to give you a couple hints for successful management of discipline. One, you have to understand the problem, clarify your concerns, motivate for a change of behavior. In other words, the motivation of the change of behavior is to talk about the future. Greg, if you come to work and your attendance is not an issue and not in violation of our policy, you and I will never have to have this conversation again. Greg, if you continue to miss work in violation of our policy, I want you to understand that you could be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination. So you have to make sure that that employee is aware. And that's a legal responsibility as well as a moral and ethical responsibility. You got to be prepared, though, to take action based on the response or lack of one. So in this discussions, we're really talking about a balance. If you're going to be successful, discipline is a process. It is a system, and it is a company-wide system, not a department, not one group. It is a system throughout, and that you deal with this system both in your salaried workforce as your hourly workforce. It is a company-wide system throughout the organization, and every one of us must be on the same page, and that's an important component that I talk about in the program. So this system should focus on ongoing training, dealing with the need to counsel and coach. And that's where I start. I don't run right to discipline the minute someone has a problem. And remember, when I use the word counsel, I talk about counseling performance. We are always talking about counseling performance and coaching. Many times, if you do a quick and early intervention, you don't even have to have any more conversations going forward. But always remember the importance of documenting any of those conversations. You'll never know what you might need as we go forward. The real key in a good, effective discipline system is not to terminate. It is to help employees improve and develop so that we can be successful. And if people believe that we're simply punishing folks, it's not going to be effective in our organization. So what are the effective discipline systems? What are the end results? How do I know? How do I know that I have a good, solid, effective discipline system? Appropriate discipline is applied. Employees receive fair and early warnings. Employees are given a chance to improve. And the action that we take is consistent for everyone. And this is the key. And when we're on the same page, these things are measurable. Okay, they're very, very measurable. And we know that that's taking place. I would like to give you a clear guideline that has worked and served me well. The foundation of discipline is really structured on making sure that all of our employees understand that we have rules and that we, those of us in leadership of the organization, are prepared to enforce those rules for everyone. And it's just not about blind compliance, but it's making sure that everyone understands that we have to protect each other. And that's the point that I want to make. So when we look at progressive discipline, basically progressive discipline is a system in place. It's not a punishment program. It is to correct the performance. And many organizations have their own form of progressive discipline. So what I look at is that it's usually a 3 or 4 step process. The first one is step 1. Remember, it's always documented. It can be referred to as an oral warning, a verbal warning, step 1, whatever you feel comfortable. Step 2 is more serious. Step 3 could be go as far as a disciplinary suspension from work without pay, and then step 4 could be termination. Some organizations have a 5th step. Whatever works in your company is fine, in my estimation, as long as it's applied even-handedly throughout everyone and with everyone inside the organization. As I said earlier, many times you can handle the situation without it escalating into having these difficult confrontations. Don't bury your head in the sand. Don't hope that it's going to go away, because it never will. Your ability here to effectively communicate is very, very important. And if you have in mind that you are firm, fair, and consistent, you will be successful. We have a quick poll. When faced with the need to confront an employee, I find that I am. Greg, I'll pass it to you.
Yep, everyone, you should have the poll up on your screen. So we're going to take just a few seconds here to pause and allow you to answer that poll. Just a few more seconds to let everybody get in. All right, Scott, it looks like we have another clear winner. 67% struggle with it, but I know I have to do it.
Thank you, Craig. And that's typically what I would expect. If discipline ever gets easy for you, my suggestion to you is that give me your keys and get out of the business, because we're dealing with human beings. So thank you for that. I think the idea is that we will struggle with it, but as we go forward and as we learn to do it in an appropriate way, you will be more comfortable in having to do it. So the key points in favor of discipline, progressive discipline, remember though, it can't be so rigid that it requires you as a supervisor to undertake a specific set of steps that must be followed in every case. Now, here's what I mean by that. There are certain infractions that would be considered much, much more serious than others and warrant action, including termination without a warning. So recognize that if someone comes in and engages in workplace violence, engages in insubordination, engages in theft or sabotaging or harassment or discrimination, those are much, much more serious. I would strongly urge you that when you have those more serious situations, that you suspend the individual pending an investigation. Never terminate on the spot. Suspend pending an investigation is the best course of action. Conduct your investigation, and then you can make a final decision. So the key learning points as we finish up today is that I hope you'll remember that discipline needs to fit the crime. People tend to feel unjustly treated if a minor infraction is disciplined with the same measure as a major infraction. Fair discipline, ladies and gentlemen, is about communications. So as we look at this, you want to develop a core message about the organization, maintain the courage necessary to be successful, even though you see it as a struggle. You have to be courageous. Get the individual's agreement to change the unacceptable conduct. And what I look at is that it's not about getting compliance. It is about getting commitment. And there's a way to do that that I get into in the program on how to get commitment, not just compliance. Always be prepared, have data, facts, and information, and create a positive environment that's conducive to productive sessions, and always maintain positive communications about expectations versus performance. Praise if the improvement is obtained. Reward if appropriate. Sometimes you might make a mistake. Acknowledge if you make a mistake. Always act with integrity. Follow up on your goals and agreements reached. And ultimately, you don't have to cut the legs out from underneath anyone during these sessions. Build and increase self-confidence and self-esteem, not take it away. So the purpose of an effective discipline system is to communicate your own sense of fairness and your desire to help your employees do their best. Please always act accordingly. So the 4 key points in managing discipline: employees must understand the guidelines from day one. Decide who is expected to administer the policy. If you don't have a functioning HR department, make sure that everyone is aware of who is the decision maker. Recognize the importance of documentation. And the best way that I can explain that to all of you, if you don't document it, it didn't happen. And always work towards cooperation and communications, but take action as required. Put your time and effort into your leadership and your management skills, and recognize that good employees are absolutely our best asset. And we create those good employees through training, training, and training. Self-discipline, though, starts with you. Take the time, take the trouble, explain, reinforce, and educate, and recognize as a manager, as a leader, as a supervisor, that responsibility is never going to go away. Greg, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Scott. Very much appreciate you spending the time with us this afternoon and sharing your expertise on managing positive discipline. Appreciate everyone's time this afternoon. I know it's not easy to always take time out of your day, but I'm positive that you got plenty to think about and apply to your organization. Would like to point out Scott's upcoming program on managing discipline. It's not till November, so you have plenty of time to get that on your calendar if you'd like to take a deeper dive into this topic and really have the opportunity to learn everything there is to know about managing discipline and get all of your questions answered. Furthermore, I'd like to have you mark your calendar for June 22nd at 10 a.m. That'll be our next webinar in the series, Understanding Emotional Intelligence to Increase Your Effectiveness, with Kent State facilitator Christy Frieden. So please take advantage of the opportunity now to clear that time on your calendar and register with us. And if you'd like to learn more and contact anyone in our office about managing discipline or any of our other professional development offerings, you can reach us at the phone number listed on your screen, or you can email us at yourtrainingpartner@kent.edu. And as we close out the program, you will be asked to take a survey. We do ask that you take just a few seconds to do that so that we can get your feedback and make appropriate adjustments to make future webinars all that much better. So once again, thanks everybody. Appreciate you joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you on June 22nd.